5 minutes a day. You do 5 minutes of breathing, strengthening, maximum respiratory breathing. If metabolic syndrome, the epidemic of our time, is caused by stress, and we have tools, whether it be walking in nature or meditation or prayer, whatever it is, that's actually reversing that. A lot of ground level, professional athletes really saying, hey, there's a difference when I breathe through my nose and when I breathe through my mouth.
Welcome to the Emotional Longevity Podcast. My name is Dr. Elisha Goldstein. Everywhere you look these days, there's advice on how to live longer and feel better. If you look at anyone's social feeds, you'll see different biohacks, diets, supplements, but most of it leaves us feeling more confused and exhausted. Now, what if the most powerful shift for your health and longevity was something free, simple, and also built in your body? Before we dive in, a quick note, I'm opening a special pre-sale for my new upcoming book, Tiny Shifts, on October 13th. You can secure a signed copy from me with a personal note and get access to deeper experiences like new live courses and community events. If you'd like early access to all the details, just hop on the list through the link in the show notes. Now, today's guest, Dr. John Douillard, has spent more than 40 years exploring how ancient wisdom and modern science can help us live longer and feel better. He's a pioneer in Ayurveda and Sports Medicine, founder of LifeSpa, and author of 7 health books, including the bestseller Eat Wheat. He's telling us how we can eat wheat. In this conversation, he reveals why the diaphragm may be the most overlooked key to our emotional health, stress resilience, and even longevity. And how also small breathing shifts can transform your body and your mind. And you can do all of that without taking time out of your life, just in the everyday things you're already doing in your life. We're going to get into that. Okay, let's dive in. Dr. John Douillard, welcome to the Emotional Longevity Podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
A lot of people see they're looking at their social feeds every day. They're looking at media. They're trying to figure out how to feel better, how to optimize their health. And it's leaving a lot of people a little bit confused and exhausted. There's gluten-free stuff on there. There's keto, there's biohacks, there's what kind of supplements should I be taking? And I feel like I've seen the whole menopause industry, coming up with a whole lot of other things as well. And what do you feel like the single most important shift people can make right now to feel better and live longer is?
I actually don't think there's any question about it. And it's something that very few people really talk about. And it's something that I started my whole career writing a book called Body, Mind, and Sport, which was a book that we published research on the difference between nose breathing and mouth breathing. And so now after 40 years of being in practice, I'm actually back to where I started in a much deeper way, understanding the importance of breathing, particularly the importance of your diaphragm. Most people don't realize that the diaphragm obviously is a breathing muscle, but it's the number one pump of your lymphatic system. And that lymphatic system is trying to carry your immune system, to detoxify your cells, all of them in your body, carry fat as baseline energy to every cell of your body. And in Ayurvedic medicine, it's the longevity system. And when one recent study showed that with elite athletes, 91% of them did not have a diaphragm relaxing and contracting fully. And so what we really have to do is get the diaphragm to fully contract and fully relax and get the rib cage to be elastic enough to let that happen. And for most of us, because every time we get stressed out, we change how we breathe. Another time something comes along, we change how we breathe again. And those stressed breathing patterns become normal to us. And then another one comes in that, we adapt to that. Next thing you know, you're shallow breathing, your diaphragm is dysfunctional, and you have no idea that happened to you. And there's research showing, if you go to the doctor for heartburn, in the medical journals, there's 15 studies showing that if you strengthen your diaphragm, you reverse your heartburn, your GERD, reflux, and digestion. Studies show that strengthening your diaphragm for just a couple of minutes, 3 minutes, will actually lower your blood pressure as well as a Western medication will. It's the diaphragm is the pump for the cerebrospinal fluid, pumping the brain's lymphatic and glymphatic systems, which dump 3 pounds of trash out of your head every year while you sleep, linked now, according to the research, to anxiety, depression, cognitive decline, inflammation, infection, autoimmunity. And it was when long haul COVID was first discovered, they linked it to congestion of the brain, lymphatic system. So we don't talk about the diaphragm at all, but it's the most important piece of the puzzle because it really keeps everything functional. And when you start breathing shallow, obviously you start breathing into the upper fight or flight receptors, your body is being told that life is an emergency. I have no idea why that happened. Sorry.
But for those of you who are not watching the YouTube thing, we had a whole bunch of fireworks coming behind John. It was really cool. But John, you're speaking my. I think that happened because what you're saying is really powerful, and it was kind of putting the exclamation point on it. But you're sort of speaking my language right here. I want to kind of dive a little bit deeper into this. You're saying the diaphragm. So most of us spend time. We're not even aware of our breathing, obviously most of the time, and certainly when we're in a stress response, which is people who experience chronic stress are less aware of this. And you're saying a simple shift of some kind of paying attention to our diaphragm and how we're breathing, even something that we can do with breathing there could actually make a big change in our physiology. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
100%. And there's science. I'm not just saying that.
Yeah.
There's thousands of years of ancient wisdom and modern science to back that up.
Can you give us some examples of that? So like people listening or watching right now would can even kind of play with that even while we're talking?
Yeah, like actually teach you how to do it.
Or just tell us what it is even. And sure, you could teach.
Yeah,
Sure.
Well, I think the first step, there's a lot of, research on pranayama and breathing exercises. And I've written many articles about the research, which is fascinating. But what I've discovered more and more just in practice is that most people don't have the rib cage and the diaphragm are sort of stuck together. As the rib cage gets hurt, your rib cage has one job, and that's to squeeze the air out. That's all it's trying to do. And the only reason your rib cage would ever open up is because your diaphragm contracted and sucked air into it and pushed that open like a balloon. But as soon as your diaphragm relaxes, the rib cage gets tight. Over time, as you shallow breathe, get stressed out, sit in the chair, in your couch, slouching, where the rib cage is now pushing my diaphragm into a downward position, pre-contracted. So now in this position, slouching on the couch, eating whatever, my diaphragm can't contract fully because it's already pre-contracted. So we spend a lot of time in a chair, in a car, sitting, and not to mention the stress that we live in as a culture, the chronic stimulation that just never goes away is chronically making us breathe differently than if we were just super relaxed. And that all creates rib cage rigidity and poor diaphragmatic function. So the first step, and it's so simple, is to get the rib cage to be free from the diaphragm, because your diaphragm attaches to the rib cage. So the whole thing just becomes rigid and tight. So one of my favorite things, I call it flossing the diaphragm, is like super, super simple, but it's also based on what the research shows and calls maximum inspiratory breathing. Maximum inspiratory breathing is what reverses the heartburn and the blood pressure and pumps the lymphatic by getting that diaphragm to contract fully and relax fully. This is obviously not a bad idea since that's how we started. So the simple exercise, and I have an article at LifeSpa.com called The Best Diaphragmatic Breathing Exercise. You can watch a more intense, elaborate video, but just take your arms up over your head like that. And then with your nose, now fill your belly only as you inhale. As you continue to inhale, fill your chest. As you continue to inhale, fill your upper chest. Now, when you're there, sip a little bit of air as much as you can to maximum and reach through the sky as high as you possibly can reach. Sip, 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 and then come back out. When you did that, most people, if you went all the way up, 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 and your diaphragm went all the way down, 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 you're going to feel a pull under that rib cage. And that's your diaphragm going down, rib cage going up, and now you're beginning to create separation between your rib cage and the diaphragm. Step 2 is to do a lateral bend. Do the same thing. Fill your belly, fill your chest, fill your upper chest, and now sip it into maximum. Feel the pull, the stretch in here. Now you're breaking up all the scar tissue and adhesions of your rib cage and your diaphragm being glued together. And then you come back all the way to the other side, squeeze the air out into a maximum exhalation. And a maximum exhalation is so like unsung because when you breathe all the way out, your diaphragm is supposed to relax and parachute up under the rib cage and push dead air space out. So you have a 500 milliliters of more oxygen coming in for more efficient respiration. And because the rib cage is so tight for most of us, there's no room for that diaphragm to parachute and fully relax. So it doesn't fully relax, nor does it fully contract. And that was 91% of athletes tested. So if they don't have it, we don't have it. And because that affects so many things, your ratios of oxygen to CO2, how you respond to stress, the lymphatic system, the brain lymphatic pumps, your digestion just below the diaphragm, your back, your low back is attached to the diaphragm. It all of a sudden starts to just, when I first wrote Body, Mind, Sport, which is teaching people how to nose breathe when they exercise that came out in 1994. And we started getting letters way before email, people saying, oh my God, my low back pain is better. My this is better. I'm going like, all I told you to do is breathe through your nose. I had no understanding really of how pervasive nose breathing and activating diaphragmatic function would be. And that's what drove me to kind of dig deeper into it and understand it more.
I mean, it makes sense to, if we just pause to think about this, aside from like east, west, people have issue with breathing maybe because they think like, oh, that's, that's starting to change. It's been changing for a long time, probably the last 20 years of gaining more acceptance around the reality of the power of breathing. But if we just kind of like pause for a second, just say like, just logically, if your stress is a contraction, the opposite of that is expansion. But then you're also saying like, hey, we can contract and squeeze this extra air out so that it leaves space for new fresh air to come in. I mean, this is all very logical about why that would, reset our body a bit. And there's a little bit of yoga in here to some degree that it feels like, but also just practical body. And then if we connect that with our emotional health for a second, and you're like, all right, so if stress is the foundation of anxiety, it's certainly a foundation of depression. If we're rebalancing our body in this way, our physiology in this way, that's going to help us feel more spacious and help us feel more grounded, because everything you're doing is talking about body. It's a stuff right now. So if we're in our body, I always kind of love to name this study. I'm not going to name the actual study, but just the idea that when we are in our bodies and more aware of and connected to our bodies, it turns the volume down on the self-referencing mind, the part of us that's like thinking, worrying, ruminating, like that kind of stuff. They're like justice scales. And so that also has that impact, turning down the connection of rumination, of worrying, and helping us feel more grounded in our body. These are all kind of emotional health tweaks too.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys remember Carl Spau, who was the breathing expert who ended up working with the 1964 Olympics when they were going to Mexico City. And it was the first high altitude Olympics. And he went to, I think, Sun Valley to train at high altitude. They brought him to Mexico. They won more gold medals. It was when Lee Evans won all the gold medals. And it was when they were holding up the black gloves when they won the medals. It was very controversial. That's what those Olympics were more remembered of. But what actually really happened when they won more gold medals in those track and field events than any other time since. And Lee Evans is quoted as saying, when he won the gold medal, he was saying, I just remember, exhale, 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 exhale. That's what he was telling himself while he was running around the track, was to get rid of all that air so he can get new air in. And that was Carl Spau's work, which was quite fascinating and a very important piece of the full diaphragmatic puzzle, right? Making sure it fully contracts and relaxes to get the air out.
Hey, taking a quick break to let you know, I've got a new book coming out called Tiny Shifts. It's about how small, intentional shifts in your emotional health can transform your stress, relationships, and even your longevity. When you join the early access list, you're going to get a free sneak peek of the Tiny Shifts mini guide and weekly insights into the top tools and trends in emotional health. Just head to drelishagoldstein.com/tiny-shifts-early. If you can't remember that, the link is also in the show notes below. Now let's get back to the episode.
What do you think and I know you've worked with a lot of athletes too. So this has been, what's interesting about this work is, this has been successful with professional athletes and in the world of like sports psychology prior to it being more accepted in the mainstream culture, right? What other kind of examples have you seen from people who are more professional athletes?
Well, Billie Jean King and Martina Navratilova did the foreword to my first book. And so did Bill Simon, who was the president of the Olympic Committee and also Secretary of Treasury of the United States. So we had a lot of ground level, professional athletes really saying, hey, there's a difference when I breathe through my nose and when I breathe through my mouth. Billie Jean King would say things like, when I would find that place of peace and calm in the turmoil of the court, she would actually then play her best game ever. She was the coach for Martina at that time, and she would chronically and constantly tell her to breathe, to breathe, to breathe. And when you breathe and you breathe fully, the abdomen can't help but contract. And there's a breathing technique in Ayurveda called Ujjayi breathing. Some people call it ocean breathing or Darth Vader, which is where you constrict the glottis back here. And when you make that sound, it engages your abdominal muscles even before you get into full exhalation. But if you just breathe out and do a full exhalation, you're going to activate your abdominal muscles. And that creates an abdominal diaphragmatic cardiac massage. And on your heart, there's the vagus nerve, which activates the vagal response. And that's what flips the brain into a meditative calm. In our research that we published in the International Journal of Neuroscience, we showed that when people would nose breathe versus mouth breathe, their brain would go into a meditative alpha state, a state of brainwave coherence during vigorous exercise. It was 100, 200 watts of resistance on an exercise bike, pretty significant. When they came back and did the same workout with mouth breathing, their brainwaves were in beta. Their brainwaves, the brain coherence was incoherent. Every parts of the brain were doing something different. But when they were locked into nose breathing, all the parts of the brain were doing the same thing. There was alpha throughout the brain. They were literally producing, riding a bike at vigorous levels, the same brainwave pattern you would see in a meditation. So imagine running as fast as you could, but your brain responding to that as a meditation. I call it the eye of the storm. The bigger the calm, the more powerful the wind. So the more we can start to understand that, like we said earlier, that chronic stimulation of overstimulation of stress that we have in our culture is keeping us in the winds of the storm. And if we can take time to dip the cloth in the dye of our own silence by meditating, by prayer, by being in nature, by just being still, we start to actually create that eye of the storm. And nose breathing being one of the most powerful ways to just turn off all the alarm bells so the body can actually experience that inner experience of composure calm. When Roger Bannister wrote the 4-Minute Mile, he said, it felt like I was going slow. He said, I felt like the world was standing still, and he's running faster than any man alive, right? So it was, and I had a runner's high experience when I first got in. That's how I got into this. I had this crazy runner's high experience that I just had to understand what happened. And that's what got me into doing research on nose breathing and mouth breathing, got me to India to study their traditional medicine. And that's how I got started with it all.
Right. So my 16-year-old son is a big cross-country athlete. And, so what would you tell him right now while during his running?
I worked with a lot of cross-country teams. Mm-hmm. And all I can tell you is that when they finish the race, most of the time, as you probably have seen, they're throwing up, they're puking.
By the way, that was my biggest, I had never been to this was a few years ago. I'd never been to a cross-country meet before. And I go there, and this is kind of a funny story. I go there and I'm waiting for them at the end. And I see these kids coming across, and there's these trash cans, and a number of them are peeling over the trash can and just puking everyone. I'm like, what kind of sport is this? A lot of people putting themselves through this. But anyway, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I had the exact same experience when I first saw that. And then I taught a track team how to do nose breathing. And it's fine to open your mouth when you're coming up the hill and you have to get, you need that emergency air. But if you can train the body to be more efficient with nose breathing, they can be nose breathing the majority of the race. And when you're nose breathing, you're activating the lower lobes of your lungs. activating that parasympathetic response, that abdominal diaphragmatic cardiac massage that keeps the brain into a repair, rejuvenation response and not just that fight or flight response, right? So we had phenomenal success with that team. It was a really small school, private school, and they just did incredibly well in their division when they started implementing nose breathing versus mouth breathing. And I was the director of player development for the New Jersey Nets in the NBA before they'd moved to Brooklyn, and taught them nose breathing as well. And it was something they had great success where, they're shooting foul shots in front of 50,000 people. It's a whole lot different than when you're doing it in your backyard, right? Where it's like you're not stressed out about it. So they found that the nose breathing techniques were really phenomenal to help give them that level of composure and calm, when the stress was the highest. And then we would train them with nose breathing during their drills so they had a baseline ability to breathe more efficiently. Because when you're breathing, we're only breathing here. We don't breathe into the lower lobes of your lungs. And this is a gravity-fed system where the majority of the exchange is in the lower lobes. So if you're not accessing that, then you're really you're forced to function in a fight or flight state in the respiration of emergency. And then you end up, when you're finished the workout, you live and breathe in the respiration of emergency. And then life becomes an emergency. And that's the fight or flight response, which says, don't digest, get up a tree. There's a bear chasing you 24/7 to save your life. And all the degenerative chemistry that gets you up that tree is chronic and constant. And that's why breathing can be such a powerful tool to just set the tone for how the fight or flight or the parasympathetic nervous system are engaged. In our study, what normally happens when you exercise is sympathetic goes to 100%, parasympathetic zeroes out. And that's fight or flight all the way. You have to stress and recover. That's the exercise model to this day. But in our study with the nose breathers, the fight or flight only went up 50%. And the parasympathetic didn't zero out. It only went down 50%. So the two opposite nervous systems were coexisting, which meant that we had the winds of the storm, the stress, and the calm coexisting at the same time. That's the runner's high. That's that ability to be dynamically active, but totally at peace and calm at the same time. That's really our potential. And when you look in nature in its most powerful forms, you see the coexistence of opposites. Look at a hurricane. Look at a solar system. Look at an atom with a nucleus with electrons spinning around it. The same rules seem to apply when they're maxing out potential. We have that ability. Okay, we're just out there in the winds of the storm, dodging refrigerators and Winnebagos and tree trunks, trying to somehow figure out a way to get through the day without feeling like I need coffee or wine or beer or a weekend to recover. That has become our culture. Where if you look at our ancient ancestors, they were in complete resonance with the stillness and silence of nature, something we've completely lost. And it affects not only our health, but study. I hate to just keep going on, but one more thing. I wrote an article about metabolic syndrome, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high cholesterol, extra weight around your belly, all that. And I looked at stress as the cause of that. And I found that under every one of those conditions, stress was the major cause of those. Then I looked at meditation as a de-stressor. And study after study after study said meditation will lower your blood pressure, lower your blood sugar, lower your cholesterol, lower your abdominal obesity. And it was like, wait a minute. If metabolic syndrome, the epidemic of our time, is caused by stress, and we have tools, whether it be walking in nature or meditation or prayer, whatever it is, that's actually reversing that, it's the elephant in the room nobody's talking about. But the science is there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Why do you think no one is? Well, I have two questions for you. Why do you think no one is talking about that? Or people are talking about it, but why do you think that doesn't stick? And I guess that maybe speaks to the pharmaceutical industry for a second. But so you can note that. But the other question is, all of these these breathing exercises, do you have to take time out of your life, like 10, 20, 30 minutes? Do you have to take that time, or is it something, because you were mentioning this a moment ago, is it something people can do while they're taking a 10-minute walk on an office break somewhere, or just in the middle of their day, without having to add something else to their to-do list, but they can just kind of like do it in the life they're already living to enhance their life? Speak to that for a second.
Well, the things that I just tell you, this thing you can do in front of your computer. So that people would love.
By the way, for those who are listening, he's reaching his hands over his head. John's reaching his hands over his head. And that was the breathing exercise we did a little earlier. Yeah.
So that's hopefully easy for most folks. The other one is you can go for a walk or a bike ride or get on a treadmill, whatever it is, and just start breathing through your nose. As soon as the breath starts to get a little short or you open up your mouth, you're full blown in emergency state. So at that point, you'd want to slow down. Another really simple exercise, go for a walk during work. Count how many steps you take on your inhalation. 1, 2, 3, 4 steps for your inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4 for your exhale. Make your goal, breathing through the nose, 10 steps for your inhalation and 15 to 20 for your exhalation. So it's going to take you a while to get there, but every day after you have a little lunch, go for a little walk. Doesn't have to be an aggressive walk, just your normal pace, and just try to get that breath to extend or lengthen. Because when you lengthen your breath, what's happening is carbon dioxide levels are actually building up because you're not breathing in so quickly. Most of us are breathing in and out, in and out, in and out. It's called overbreathing. And one study showed that people who shallow breathe, which is like most of us, 75% of the oxygen they were breathing in, they breathed it right back out unused. So we're completely breathing inefficiently because we can't jam any more oxygen into our blood. It's already at 98% saturation, but we're blowing off all this oxygen we can't use. And when we do that, we're blowing off excess carbon dioxide as well. So what happens is the ratio between your oxygen and CO2 becomes high oxygen and low CO2. And most people are walking around with that ratio. And that's why when people have a panic attack, they put a paper bag over their mouth and they rebreathe their carbon dioxide to get calm again. And we now know through the Bohr effect that when oxygen is high, CO2 is low, the bond between the oxygen and the hemoglobin in your blood stays super tight. So even though your doctor says, oh, you're fine, you have 98% saturation of oxygen in your blood, that's not what's in your tissues, in your brain, in your muscles. And that's why learning to slow the breath down the way it's normally designed to function gives time for CO2 levels to rise. CO2 tolerance on the brainstem begins to increase, so you'll be able to tolerate a longer, slower breath without feeling the urge to breathe again quickly and rapidly.
All right. So just kind of sum up again, what would be a good practice to do there then after that again? So
Sure.
that people...
So going for a walk and count how many steps you take on the inhale and the exhale, your goal being 10 steps for your inhalation through the nose and 15 to 20 steps for the exhalation through the nose. That's your goal.
And the other thing I heard you say was that if you find that your breath's becoming short or you can't do that, maybe you can slow down a little bit, or you can shorten that and then build up to that.
Right.
Yeah.
So you could listen to, when you start going for a walk or you're on a bicycle or a treadmill or whatever, just walk real slow and notice the space between the breath as like a sine wave. There's no urgency to get the next breath. It's a natural sine wave. We're nice and easy. There's space, but not a hold, but a natural pause between each breath. As soon as you begin to go harder, that space is going to start to shorten up before you open your mouth. As soon as that space starts to shorten up, that's when you slow down. Way before the mouth breathing, go down, reset the calm breath, and then try to go after it again. When I was, when my book first came out, Body, Mind, Sport, I used to teach a class in North Boulder Park here in Boulder, Colorado. And people would come every week. It was on the morning every week, like on a Wednesday morning. And I'd teach them this nose breathing thing. And it was early 1990s. It was really kind of the crazy guy with the nose breathing.
Right.
Guy.
That's a total new thing.
Yeah. And then one day, about 3 fire trucks drove up and they put on their stuff and they came over to the class and they said, we're here for the class. I'm going, really? And they said, yeah, we have competitions where we race up hills with our tanks to see how long a tank will last. And we had this young kid has been coming to your class the last couple of weeks, and his tank lasted 36 minutes. The record was 28 minutes. It blew everybody away. 1 minute saves a life. 5, 10 minutes saves multiple lives. So we're here to learn how to do it. And So I ended up teaching an in-service in the Denver Fire Department many, many years ago about the difference between, really having what we call respiratory efficiency, breathing that completely. And the overflow, like we said in the very beginning, is just overwhelming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This podcast called Emotional Longevity, the idea of how do we support emotional health for the long run? Also, what does this all have to do with longevity? What myths about longevity like drive you crazy? Like, are there any things that come out? Because there's just so much stuff that comes out. Like, does anything drive you crazy since you kind of know a lot about this stuff?
I think that there's things that come out that are just untested and dangerous. So I think that's really, we tend to just hear someone talk and we jump on that bandwagon. And then we find out, oh, that's maybe not the best way to do it. Or they take that drug or that supplement off the market. Or you're taking so much of it, you're actually doing more harm than worse. Or you're stacking nutrients and you've overconsumed certain nutrients without even realizing it. It's sort of a slippery slope. And I think so. And that's why I love the Ayurvedic approach, because it's time tested, right? It's thousands of years old. And it's still practiced today. The All Indian Ayurvedic Congress is the largest medical organization in the world to this day. And we now have modern science to back it up. So my state is, if you have time tested, and they had a whole branch of their system on longevity. They weren't like, longevity is not a thing. Longevity, the longevity wasn't like how many years you lived. Like that was the goal to get there. It was what you did with those years. And studies at UCLA have shown that in the latter third of your life, we all want to find God before it's too late. So we become a little more spiritual, generally speaking, in the latter third of our life. But studies show we're actually not only desiring spiritual, awareness, we're actually more capable. We're hardwired to actually perceive subtle energy in ways we weren't in our younger years, which means that living a long time is part of the process of refining the nervous system, refining this human instrument to perceive subtle energy, to thin the veil between the physical and the spiritual. So the whole point of living long was to evolve this human species, to raise our vibration, to raise our frequency, to free ourselves from old emotional patterns of behavior, and move into we call the wisdom years, where you can be wise or dumb, thus wisdom, which means that you can really, take the last third of your life and use it to really become wise and share that with your grandkids, or you can, continue to do the same dumb thing again and again and carry those emotions into your deathbed. So it was really about, and also thinning the veil between the physical and the spiritual. They weren't like, you don't have to die to find out for sure you're a soul or not, you're a spirit or not. You can actually begin to realize that the part of you that never ends or never changes, which is our soul and our spirit, if you believe that, you can have some perception of that while you're here. And that was part of their reason for living a long life.
Is that what you mean when you say subtle energies? That's
subtle energies means like, okay, let's think about it. We have circadian rhythms. Birds fly south, whales migrate, leaves turn red, fall off trees. It's all circadian rhythms, light, dark cycles. They're inside of us too. Our biological clocks are turning off and turning on, supposed to turn off and turn on based on them. But we can perceive those circadian rhythms as well, just like the birds fly south, but we're sort of immune. We don't allow ourselves to perceive the subtle. Our stimulus is all based on what's coming in from the outside world. And we spend no time discovering or exploring our own inner space. The microbiome, we can't see those bugs, but they're running and governing everything. They talked about the microbiome, they called them krimi. 5,000 years ago in the Rig Veda, they were talking about these invisible bacteria. Well, how did they know there were invisible bacteria if they couldn't see them 5,000 years ago? But they knew them. And they talked about, not only did they know that they were there, they said they could be good or bad. And they said, don't kill them. Don't go in there and taking drugs, herbs or things. They should create a better environment. It was all about the ecology. We're just beginning to understand that now in Western medicine. that the environment actually has a lot to do with the proliferation of beneficial bacteria. So that's what I mean by subtle energy being, and also perceiving, interoception, the ability to perceive, what's happening on the inside of your body versus just proprioception you only feel out here. We have interoceptors on the inside, on your diaphragm, that are actually designed to allow us to perceive, the good, the bad, the ugly, to actually help us perceive, patterns of behavior that are serving you and ones that are not serving you, and then help us evolve and take action to free ourselves from patterns that we created in childhood to survive that we're not using or not needing as adults. And how do you free yourself from those old mental, emotional patterns? A big part of the longevity puzzle in Ayurveda.
Which might be, eating a lot of high sugary foods or something like that to be able to soothe ourselves because mom and dad are fighting. And so this really helps me. And I bring that into adulthood, and all of a sudden I'm not relating to food in an optimal way for my body and my health. I mean, part of what I'm hearing you saying is optimal health, when we were talking about, we didn't get to the pharmaceutical part, but is more than just feeding ourselves some quick fix Western intervention. Let's say sometimes, even though there's a place for pharmaceuticals, but just to kind of sum up this segment, it's there's something about retraining the body to do more what it was designed to do. And that could give us a big kind of leg up in enhancing our lives. With the food piece, you talk a lot about wheat and gluten. I think you wrote a book called Eat Wheat, was that it, or something like that, right? And I know for a long time there's some people are just actually gluten insensitive or are sensitive. But a lot of people are avoiding eating gluten more and more. And you're telling us to eat it. So can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah. What I'm suggesting is that the wheat that people eat might be a canary in the coal mine, letting know there's actually a bigger problem than the wheat. I get it that wheat has glyphosate, it's been processed. There's issues with our entire food chain, our food supply in this country for sure. However, the problem is that if the people said, if it was just like, don't eat wheat, that would have been fine. But it became, don't eat wheat, don't eat dairy, don't eat lectins, don't eat nuts, seeds, beans, legumes, don't eat nightshades, don't eat oxalates, don't eat goitrogens. You know what I mean? It just got worse and worse and worse. And I call that bubble wrap in your diet. All those foods can't be bad. In fact, studies show that those harder to digest foods like anti-nutrients that are on beans or anti-nutrients that are on nuts, they're called lectins or phytic acids that everybody says, don't eat, don't eat, don't eat, or oxalates, don't eat, don't eat. They actually provide a little hormesis, an irritation of the lining of the gut that actually we respond with what's called gut immunity, which is 70% of our immune response. And when you actually take those foods out of the diet, you begin to see gut immunity going down. And I'll give you a study example of that. They did studies with people who ate wheat, and then they compared them to people who were gluten-free but didn't have to be. So they weren't celiac. And the people that ate wheat had 4 times less mercury in their blood than people who were gluten-free but didn't have to be. They had significantly more good bugs, less bad bugs, and more killer T cells than the people who were gluten-free but didn't have to be. And people, even when they're celiac, they say, take wheat out, you're fine. No, you're not fine. People with celiac, they take wheat, they feel better, but they struggle with long-term nutritional deficiencies years after they've stopped the wheat. So it's not the wheat that was the actual culprit. Wheat was creating a severe hypersensitivity, but we didn't really fix the problem with the celiac. They still have nutritional deficiencies as a result of that. So the idea is, let's fix the upper digestion, the lower digestion, the microbiome, the lymph, the liver function, the bile flow, and all that, before we just throw all these foods out the window and say that they're really harmful for us. And I'll give you one really cool study. It was with Amish kids. Amish kids have the lowest rates of asthma on the planet. And their genetic cousins, the Hutterites, came from the same valley in Switzerland, and they have the highest rates of asthma on the planet. Same genetics, one has the highest, one has the lowest rates of asthma. The Amish kids are running barefoot in the barns with cows as pets. The Hutterites have stainless steel, sterile everything, sort of that kind of dairy farming, both dairy farmers. And when they measured the dust in the barn these Amish kids were breathing, they found that the dust was creating a little bit of irritation on the respiratory tract to create an immune response against getting asthma. So the more that we keep going down the road of taking food out of our diet, the more vulnerable we become, the less gut immunity we have. And it's really important that we begin to look at how we can look at, why am I not able to eat those foods? When I was 18, I could eat them, and Wonder Bread wasn't good for us either. You know what I mean? So it's not like, I get that there are certain foods, and I'm all about whole foods and organic and recognizable food and not processed food, all that. But there's more to it than that. Most people have 75% of the American population have some type of digestive imbalance that they just ignore. Extra right around their belly, lymphatic congestion. They eat greasy food, they feel terrible. When you were 14, you could eat greasy food and feel great. Well, what happened? Well, your liver and gallbladder got congested, and you probably have bile sludge, and you're not making the bile like you once did. And the bile is kind of it regulates how you poop. It regulates the consistency of your stool. The bile emulsifies the good fats, gets rid of the bad fats, and it also is a buffer for stomach acid. You lose bile flow from seed oils and all the environmental pollutants, and that becomes sludgy because that's the garbage can of the body. You're not going to make stomach acid the way you should, and you're going to start seeing a whole bunch of digestive sensitivity starting to kick in. And that's kind of where I look at it with my patients. Instead of giving them a life sentence of don't eat, don't eat, don't eat, don't eat, I try to get them stronger so they have a wide variety of foods they can eat. So they can eat wheat in season, they can eat nuts and seeds in season, they can eat meat in season, they can eat whatever they want in season in a recognizable form. And that makes a world of difference, and takes away them having to bubble wrap their diet and live in this bubble all the time because I don't feel good if I move outside my bubble. That's not health.
So what's the solve for fixing your gut? Because what I hear you saying is it's not the wheat that's necessarily the issue. It's kind of weak digestion that we have. There's something going on our gut. So what are you saying the solve is for that? To fix the gut?
Yeah. So we do know that things like pesticides and insecticides will kill bugs, microbes, and they literally kill the microbes in your mouth that make the enzymes to help you digest things like wheat. So we really do want to eat clean food, and getting into heirloom grains and things that are haven't been processed to the help. Obviously that makes sense, but still most people need a digestive reboot. We have so many ways to. I have at LifeSpa.com, you can take our digestive health quiz that'll ask you questions about your stomach acid, your liver gallbladder flow, the coordinated effort of stomach acid bile flow, pancreatic duodenal enzymes, the quality of your intestinal lining, the microbiome, the lymphatic system that starts in your intestinal tract, which is the system of longevity, really. It's the carrying your immune system and taking out all the trash. And so we kind of do a kind of a troubleshooting questionnaire. And that's what Eat Wheat was really about, was, hey, let me teach you how to see what part of your digestion is struggling and how we can use herbs and foods and lifestyle to help reboot and restore function in those areas. So you don't have to bubble wrap your diet.
Yeah. A lot of your background comes from Ayurveda or Ayurvedic work, and not everyone really know, but people have heard that. They've heard Deepak talk about that years ago, but they don't really know necessarily what it is. Tell us what the essence of that is, and also just to kind of let everyone know where this is going. Why does it matter in the life we're living right now, when we have this kind of more chronic stress? Things are really overwhelming in the world right now. People are feeling it, I can tell. Screens, busy lives, like all of that.
So Ayurveda is the traditional system medicine from India, kind of the Vedic culture, thousands of years old. Ayu means life, Veda means science. So it's a science of life. So they, as most traditional cultures did, were deeply studying nature, rhythms in nature. They talked about circadian rhythms, biological clocks, how to live in harmony and sync, when to eat, when to exercise, when to sleep. They talked about all this stuff thousands of years ago. And they talked about diet and exercise and pranayama, yoga and breathing, how to de-stress, how to detoxify, because there were arsenic coming in their rice that they had to deal with, and people were getting toxic from that, which is still happening today. So there was a whole system of medicine. And when I was studying that in India and I came back, I kind of co-directed Deepak Chopra Center for 8 years with him. I started teaching medical doctors, and that's when I realized that I needed to find science for all this stuff, And so I started bringing the ancient wisdom and the science together, and I was blown away by how much science is there to prove the ancient wisdom. And science alone that we have today can prove really whatever it wants. I mean, I can show you studies that coffee's good or coffee's bad or soy's good or soy's bad. I've written articles on lectins, how they are really good for you. But there's also studies on how they're bad, phytic acids, you name it. I'll give you science on both sides of that aisle. So how do you know? And people don't know. They're confused. So when you have something that's been around for thousands of years and you have science, I feel like that's a really great place to start. And that's what we do at LifeSpa. We kind of get people started with the basics, eating seasonally, because that's how every human ate for millions of years, well, at least hundreds of thousands of years as humans, but as early species, hominoids, we were eating seasonally for millions of years. And now we don't. We go to the grocery store, we eat the same food every day of the year. We eat blueberries every day of the year. We have no recognition that the microbes in the soil change from one season to the next. The bugs in our gut, as in the hunter-gatherer tribes, their gut bugs change from one season to the next. So I wrote my second book was called The 3-Season Diet, Eating with the Harvests of Nature. There's 3 harvests, a spring harvest, summer harvest, and a fall harvest for winter eating. And I tried to make it easy for folks to matter of fact, we put these grocery lists out for free. This is a winter grocery list.
Is that downloadable somewhere?
It's free on my website. Go to
Okay,
lifespa.com.
cool.
It's right on the homepage. It says new here, start here. You guys print these out for free. And you just circle the foods you like. The ones with the asterisks are the superfoods for each season. And now you're eating seasonally. You're getting the right bugs in your gut for the right season. And it's, the squirrels eat nuts and seeds in the winter. Why? Well, they're there. It's nature's antidote to the coldness and dryness of that season, right? And if they didn't have those nuts, they'd freeze to death probably. So the harvest, it provides us insulation against the coldness of winter, insulation against the mucus production of spring, the allergy season. The earth is holding on to more water in the spring. We hold on to more water in the spring. The nature's harvest isn't mucusy pasta and pizza. It's, root vegetables and dandelion and burdock and things that are very astringent, maybe some berries, right? In the summer, it's cooling fruits and vegetables. So the diet changes and the microbes on those foods change as well to support the boosting immunity in the winter. And the bugs in the spring boost decongesting you and helping you protect against allergies in the spring. And the ones in the summer, the microbes on the foods in the summer and the foods themselves all provide the dissipating of heat so you don't overheat during those summer months. This was not just thrown together, right? I mean, even Einstein said the field underneath everything, those quantum fields, they're intelligent, they're informed. Max Planck, Einstein, all called them intelligent. This is not a random. This is, everything's here in an intelligent fashion. And so Ayurveda was like a study of that intelligence. And it was like, wow, they knew a lot. And it was super logical, incredibly pervasive. I mean, just volumes and volumes and volumes of textbooks that are now backed by modern science. So that's why I love it.
I mean, that's the thing that I've heard throughout this interview, just to kind of like weave this back in or kind of call back to this, is that Ayurveda, this everything we've been talking about, you may have been out for 5,000 years. They've done all this research. It's not some kind of soft science woo type thing. It's something that is based in a tremendous amount of human experience, and also what you've been weaving in here with so many references to modern research studies is it almost seems like science is starting to catch up to it right now. And so I think that's what people who are listening, that's what you want to that's one of the things you want to hear, is that if you're someone who, hears science and is like, okay, that's science behind it, this is what's happening. Science is starting to catch up with some of these traditions that have been around for a long time.
Yeah, no, 100%. You're absolutely right. And the other part about Ayurveda, which I love, is that the other definition is Ayu is life and Veda is truth. And truth is, kind of that part of us that never changes. And so they understood that body is here, like we talked about before, to sort of evolve and, yes, raise our kids, make money, help make the world a better place, but also, thin that veil between the physical and spiritual, refine our perception, get rid of old emotional patterns of unconscious behavior that we created as young children and become conscious. And so there's the whole spiritual side of this as well, not religion, but just the fact that this human body has the ability to recognize on a quantum level that there's a oneness, there's an underlying unified connection. And they even said that when the field of intelligence becomes us, and then our cells forget that they're connected to the field, that's the cause of disease. So it's a level of ignorance that our minds create. So I hold on for dear life. I need money, stimulation. I want you to like me, love me, appreciate me. And that's our role. That's what we do. We just want everybody to, we all of our happiness comes from the outside world of stimulation. And so does our sadness. But everybody's like, wait a minute, man, why don't we turn the mirror in and look within? And you'll see that there's access to the field, the joy, the love, the kindness, the giving, the caring. These are all qualities that we all have, but our minds go, no, I want them to like me. And that means I might, have to be mean to them, or I might have to manipulate them in some way to get them to like me. That is such a gross version of the human condition versus being free enough and brave enough to be kind in the heat of battle, be giving and loving and caring, and more altruistic in the way we live this life. That's what they were going for.
Yeah.
From the Ayurvedic perspective, it wasn't just live a life, make a lot of money, and get rich. It was all about somehow coming back to an awareness that we're all connected.
Yeah.
And we have to act like that.
I mean, I think that's at the source of most mystical traditions, is that sense in what you're being able to pause. That sense of interconnectedness, that you're naturally connected. There's a natural belonging. You don't need to look outside for it. There's you just being alive are in a state of natural belonging. And then once you tap into that, then you'll relate to everything outwardly a bit differently, is also what I'm hearing you say. I think that could be a whole nother episode, which I'm sure you've kind of shot in different places around around even more of the spiritual explanation of all of this. And it was interesting. I saw an article recently that said more people in the field, more like leaders in the field of AI, artificial intelligence right now, are starting to seek more spirituality than they have in the past. And I don't know if that's because they're seeing this artificial intelligence starting to gain an intelligence, and they're like, okay, I think I need to find something more intelligent, because it's not going to be humans necessarily, but maybe there's something larger than myself. There's that sense of interconnectedness. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but that is actually something that I'm noticing. Also, people are seeking right now a bit more access to spirituality than in the past. There's another wave that's starting to hit right now that I'm noticing when I speak with people about that. Maybe there's more uncertainty in the world. There's more, I don't know if you're noticing any of this stuff.
I know that after the pandemic they had in the early 1900s, was 1916, there was a huge surge of people becoming more religious after that. People were dying and all that. And I think we're in the post-COVID era and the AI era, and a period, like you said, of such uncertainty. It makes sense that people are looking for something that they can hold on to, that it can't be taken away. Because everything from the outside can be taken away. We're happy when good things happen, and we're not happy when bad things happen. We're not weatherproofed. Our happiness is up based on what's going on outside of us. I think we've all experienced not happiness when based on things happening. We feel and experience a level of joy, a level of kindness, a level of deep caring for each other. And when we do that, the oxytocin, longevity hormone surges, the good bugs proliferate, the bad bugs disappear. They did a really cool study with giving, and they had two groups giving gifts. One group in a hedonistic way, where they gave the gift with an expectation to get some praise in return on that investment. And then the other group gave it a eudaimonic way, where they gave in a way where it was just the gestalt. It was just loving. I just want you to love this and have this gift. I have no need for anything in return. And when they gave it a hedonistic way, it had a negative effect on the epigenetically on the people they were giving it to. So they could tell you were just all in it for you. And when they gave the gift in a eudaimonic way, it had a positive effect on the genetic code. So when you are interacting with people from your heart, giving, loving, and kind, they feel it. And they feel safe in that to open up the kind of delicate petals of maybe their flower, their delicateness, and let something real out. And we begin to communicate each other, not transactionally, but through this deep connection of what's actually real that connects human beings. And that's something that many traditional cultures talked about. And I think that's one of the things that I love about Ayurveda is it takes you all the way. You can just get it for your heartburn and fix your heartburn and your back pain and your indigestion and your constipation for sure, and stop there. But you also have the ability to go further if you so choose.
Yeah, there's another study that was it was like a Starbucks gift cards that they were giving out. I think it was college students where they were doing it for those two different reasons, and it had an impact on the level of the person who was giving. It was like, what impact did it have on their level of, and I think they only studied subjective well-being, which is positive emotions versus negative emotions, and life satisfaction, to keep it simple. And it had a statistically significant impact in the way that you were giving, your intention behind the giving. I'm aware of your time. I'm so grateful for you spending this time with us. We could do a part 2 and part 3. You have so much really important experience and knowledge and practical application that just can weave into our everyday life. If you could say something to somebody who was someone who's listening right now or watching, and they're kind of feeling stuck and broken with their health struggles, what would you say to them?
Well, I would say go to LifeSpa.com. I've got 1,500 articles there, all for free, with deep dives into the research, with videos that are attached to them, where you can learn how to kind of type up your health concern, and then maybe take the digestive health quiz, take the lymph quiz, take the body type quiz, take the emotional body type quiz. You can learn so much about yourself and what to do naturally with, combining this beautiful ancient wisdom, which is time-tested, and the modern science. So if I'm not sure what the condition would be, definitely everybody should learn how to breathe. And that's something people do talk about it, but not from the point of view of the health impact. They talk about it, well, breathing can give you better performance. And that's, of course, where I started with nose breathing. But from the perspective of the health provided with a strong diaphragm, the research on that is overwhelming. And that's a really great place. And it's absolutely free. All you got to do it is a couple of minutes, 5 minutes a day, and you can actually reverse so many, protect against. I was in a restaurant maybe a year ago, and I was coming out were about 3 or 4 elderly folks in their 90s, and their mouths were open. They're frail. I was helping them get through the door because they were really struggling. And it was really clear to me. I said, golly, if someone would have just told them they could breathe 5 minutes a day, that strengthening of the diaphragm would reverse and prevent their age-related cognitive decline. It would reverse or prevent their heartburn, their indigestion. It would move their lymphatic system so they would be able to detoxify better. It would lower their blood pressure. When you talk about detoxifying the lymph, that means getting the immune system stronger, getting the respiration stronger, getting the detoxification of your joints stronger. It's just so incredibly easy for folks to just do these simple things, and the results were so profound. 5 minutes a day. And that's in the best. 5 minutes a day. You do 5 minutes of breathing, strengthening, maximum inspiratory breathing for your diaphragm. you're going to turn that thing back on over time. And because a lot of people won't do stuff, but if you give them 5 minutes a day and you really work that diaphragm, it's a game changer.
Is there a 5-minute guide that you have on LifeSpa that, or
If
like
you go to the article, the best diaphragmatic breathing exercises, and you'll see there's 3 videos there with 3 sets of exercise, and you can kind of mix and match them, but each day a little bit different. You can move them around, but all about getting that diaphragm and the rib cage moving. And then, of course, when you're walking and, breathe through your nose, long, slow in, long, slow out. That's when you're doing just when you're walking and talking or driving, you can do long, slow, deep breathing, super easy.
I love that as a place for people to start too, because there's this trance of being too busy to do anything really, or wanting to do something, but not getting to it. And then reinforcing this idea that I basically suck and I can't do anything. And that kind of idea. But if you give that, like, hey, you take a walk anyway, sometimes here's something you can do while you're walking. I love that suggestion you gave. I think you said 10 steps in, 15 steps out, something like that.
When you're counting your steps when breathing, 10 steps for the inhalation and 15 to 20 for the exhalation.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much, John. This has been a real gift. And is there any final things but actually, just to kind of close, we've mentioned LifeSpa a couple times in here. Are there any other things that are happening right now, or that we can tell people that are where to find you?
Well, at LifeSpa.com, I've got a bunch of courses coming up that I'm teaching. I'm teaching an 18-week deep dive into all this knowledge coming up in January. So you can get that on my website, LifeSpa.com. Also, we put out articles on ancient wisdom, modern science 3 times a week at LifeSpa.com. So you can sign up for our newsletter there. And of course, we have an Ayurvedic store. I've been formulating Ayurvedic herbal formulas with my patients, for almost 40 years now. So you can check out our story of skincare. All our books and things are there as well. But yeah, lots there at LifeSpa.
Love that. Impressive. Thank you so much. I look forward to doing this again sometime.
All right. Yeah, I love that. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Hey, thanks for joining me on this episode of the Emotional Longevity Podcast. I hope you found it as inspiring and thought-provoking as I did. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to hit like down below, subscribe to this channel, and share it with someone you know who could benefit from these insights. Your support helps us grow this incredible community and reach more people who need it. If today's conversation resonated with you and you're ready to go deeper, if you're ready to truly integrate these ideas into your life, I'd love to invite you to join me in a beautiful, supportive community that's doing this transformative work together. It's a space where you'll find guidance, connection, and the tools you need to create lasting emotional health and resilience. Check out the links in the description below to learn more. And before you go, make sure to tune into our next episode. It's one that you won't want to miss. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, emotional health isn't about just feeling good. It's about building the foundation for a longer, healthier, and more joyful life. I'll see you soon.